all of the villages that didn't want to take part in the war, those are the 2 million Arabs that live here today. The people who try to fight against a Jewish state, fight against the Jews and the Israelis, are the ones who got displaced. There are TV shows for adults where they still teach tropes about the elders of Zion. How can you make a whole theory about a bunch of Jews in the same room agreeing about everything? That doesn't make any sense. You don't have evidence, and you have to redefine the term. It's not a genocide. They're very smart, they're very capable. Treat them as adults. If you allow the kid to throw a tantrum and you give him what he wanted, he will learn that that's the way to get things he wants. The fact that we're empowering Hamas's rhetoric publicly as a state raises the price for the hostages. We offer peace treaties, we offer equal rights. You don't want it? Don't come complaining.
Welcome. We've got Jon Legarda here. I've been following you for a year and a half. It seems like this since the start of the war. I'm not sure exactly what point I jumped in, but been putting out a lot of really interesting content, explaining things in a very clear, concise way.
Thank you very much.
You got some great rants too. I always appreciate a good rant. We're here to hear a little bit about your story and the kind of advocacy you've been doing, how it's been effective, and we're gonna, I assume, explore some other topics as well.
Let's jump in.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, in a nutshell, the advocacy, I started on October 7th. I started a couple of weeks afterwards. On October 7th, I think we were all shocked since day one. For the first 2 weeks, I was basically just in my car. I was driving around equipment from north, south, east, everywhere. And once I started seeing masayot, trucks, finally from the government on the road, so my little Hyundai was not really relevant anymore. So I said, what else can I do? I know how to make videos, so let's start making videos.
Can I ask, what were you doing while you were driving on your car? Like volunteering, helping?
Volunteering. So on the first couple of weeks, we the people were basically the people managing the war. So driving around equipment for soldiers, food, turumot, all kinds of things. I had friends who basically opened like an HQ, and they got phones from people. I need somebody to drive this. They would call me, and I would go to Jerusalem, to the Gaza envelope, to the south, to the north, and start driving around whatever people needed. I drove like equipment from the people who escaped from the kibbutzim. So a lot of people started giving computers and food and clothes. So pick those up, go to Jerusalem, give it to them. Pick things from Ben Gurion and drive to the north, vests and drone batteries, the whole thing. And while I used to like wake up at 5:30 in the morning, start driving, come back late at night and go to sleep, and next day the same thing. And I was just watching the news 24/7. While I was driving, the news were on. I just couldn't disconnect. And once I wasn't driving anymore, I said, what else can I do that will be relevant? I am a video producer, so let's try to explain what's going on. Because I was born in Spain, I grew up in Spain, and I made Aliyah the second time to Israel when I was 15.
The second time?
Yeah, we did Aliyah the first time when I was 4. We lived here for 5 to 6 years. We went back to Israel, and then we came back when I was 15. So I knew what it's like to be a Jew outside of Israel, which apparently a lot of Israelis don't. When I came here when I was 15, it's always the same answer. Oh, you came here from Spain. What did you lose here? Why did you come to this hellhole? Israelis have no idea what they have in their own hands. They have no idea what this place is and means. When October 7th happened, suddenly everybody was shocked with all of the anti-Semitism going around. Me and most people who grew up outside were not shocked at all. I mean, when I was growing up in Spain in the 90s, too much of a big percentage of people still thought the Jews had horns and a tail, and I'm not making this up.
Wow.
I find that it's so interesting when I hear that, because I mean, I grew up in New York. Maybe it's a more heavily Jewish area, but I never felt... Or maybe I was just so dense that I wasn't picking up on the anti-Semitic signals. I don't know, but I didn't feel that.
Look, in places like New York, LA, I know the Jewish community, I mean, you have your, I don't know if it's called close quarters, but it's much more mainstream. Like Katz Deli, it's one of the biggest delis in New York, and it's a Jewish deli, basically. B&H, It's a very, very religious Jewish business, and it's the biggest photography and electronics store. So it's being Jewish in LA, in New York is very prominent. In Europe, it's not as prominent. And Europe has a slight history of anti-Semitism.
Where did the Jews go?
Exactly. That was never just, it never evaporated. I mean, they started behaving better towards the Jews in places like Germany and Poland, but in most places like France, Spain, I don't know the rest, but basically anti-Semitism, like the tropes, never went anywhere.
Do you think there's any difference between sort of the classic anti-Semitism, which is what your words are evoking, you know, the horns and, you know, the miserly Jew and the blood, but that just seems sort of a different world from the kind of anti-Semitism that I'm seeing now, which is more about how Jews are colonialists and the brutality of you know, the Israelis against the Gazans, and, you know. I
think the point that you're asking right now is one of the most important points that everybody who's doing advocacy doesn't notice, especially here in Israel. 99.9% of anti-Semitism comes basically from a lack of knowledge, or just a knowledge of something that's erroneous. Like people thinking Jews have horns and a tail. It doesn't come from a bad place. It just comes from, yeah, that's what my family told me. That's what I've seen in the news. It doesn't come from, oh, I hate the Jews, let's try to fight. No, it just comes from a place of a borut. How do you say that in English?
Borut.
Yeah, lack of knowledge, basically. So you have that 99.9% of the people, like right now in the United States, most of the students, most of the people hear these horrible things about Israel. So obviously they're going to think that Israel is this horrible place. If I was born in Spain as a Catholic, like all of my friends over there, and I didn't hate Israel or the Jews, I would be the inhumane one. And then you have the people who are actually pushing those tropes knowingly. That is the real evil. So the reason I think that my advocacy was so strong, especially in the beginning, because when most Israelis were hating on the haters, you stupid people, you hate it, I was trying to come from a more understanding place. The first video that I did that blew up got to like 6 million views on Instagram, got to 6 million views on Twitter, when I didn't even have Twitter. Somebody took it from Instagram, posted there, and it got viral. Elon Musk commented on it, okay?
Wow.
He wrote agreed, but Elon Musk commented on it, okay? That's everything. But the video was, Dear pro-Palestinians, I know you have good intentions, but try to understand what you guys are doing. If you see a swastika in your marches, if you say Intifada or From the River to the Sea, I was trying to at least explain to most of them, to all of them, what they're actually doing. They're actually promoting violence. Because I know they're coming from a place of trying to bring peace to poor people who are having this horrible time. And that's what I think most people in Israel and in the world are not seeing. Most anti-Semitism basically comes from a lack of knowledge, not from evil, not from hate. It just comes from hate. You hear all these stories and all these tropes about these small minority group of people. Obviously, they're going to hate him. So I think that's a very important point. That I don't always manage to keep my cool, but most of my videos are trying to bridge this gap, give people the actual knowledge of what's actually happening in Gaza, in Israel, about Judaism, so then you can make your own decisions.
Mm-hmm. I remember immediately after the war, most of the Hasbara videos that I saw were all focused on the hostages and how horrible the experience is that they're having. And to me, it just never seemed like it would be very effective because, you know, people seeing it, if they're anyway somewhat inclined against Jews, then seeing like, okay, Jews who basically have been asking for it are now suffering. Okay, boo-hoo. Like, that, I felt like that was going to be sort of the response of most of the people, whereas if it was possible to make them understand that this war that they're seeing through the media is not what's going on in real life, then maybe that would...
100%. And I think not just the hostages, but people today, a lot of advocates are still saying this is because October 7th. And what most people don't understand, it's not the amount of people that died. It's a few more points. First of all, it's how they died, how the Gazans did what they did, but more basically, it's the fact that everything that led up to October 7th, they had years of planning, of preparing, of gathering information, of gathering intelligence, building the tunnel. I mean, October 7th was just the result. It's not what happened on that day. It's the fact that that shows you what the Gazans, or at least the people leading Gaza and most Gazans, what their true desire is. That was the result of what Einat Wilf, I love that woman, what she calls Palestinianism. That shows you the real desire and goal of that people. The fact that you had so many Hamas terrorists and Gazan civilians praising Allah, calling their parents, shows you the fact that inside of Gaza, they are teaching them that the best thing that they can do is murder Jews and retake what was allegedly, from their point, stolen from them, stolen from their grandparents. That, I think, is the main point of October 7th. It's not the amount of people that died. That is horrible. And it's not just what they did on that day. I think how they behaved with the Israelis on that day is a result of all of that. So I think that when we talk about October 7th, we should talk about that, the 16 years of basically, or a few decades even before, of the hate that they have been rooting inside their people for so long.
And if you want to point your finger at something even, just go a bit further back to the disengagement. I mean, this would not have happened if there were Jews living. It's just, it couldn't happen. This kind of terrorism and hatred could not have, brooded and brewed so intensely if...
The disengagement, we can talk about it for hours, if it was a good idea or a bad idea. I think that the main bad idea of the disengagement, I would have accepted a disengagement if it was through an agreement, but not an agreement that they accept, that they accept to recognize that Israel is a Jewish state and they give up the right of return. Once they can accept these two terms, then they have no legitimacy to do what they did. They have no legitimacy to build Gaza how they did. But because we just gave it to them without them recognizing Israel, then the idea of Gaza was basically to construct a launching pad to retake Israel, because they don't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. They don't recognize Israel as a state. I mean, the PA now does recognize as a state, but not as a Jewish state. So I think that's one of the biggest points. So exactly, when you talk about the hostages, or just October 7th, the amount of people that died, everybody who doesn't know what the reality on the ground, they say, yeah, but look what's happening in Gaza since. What's happening in Gaza since, and what happened before, is all a result of that indoctrination that resulted on October 7th and resulted on how Hamas chose to defend, because they came to Israel knowing Israel is going to retaliate. And they built the tunnels. They chose where to put their ammunition, where to hide the hostages. All of this was pre-planned. It's not like just one day they woke up and said, okay, let's kill Jews and hide them wherever we can. This was all pre-planned. We have the plans. We have the testimonies from the terrorists. We have all of this. It's all outside. They planned all of this. They basically took all of the human rights rules and back engineered it. Reverse engineered all of these humanitarian rules. So the war in Gaza on October 7th is all a result of that. And I think that's the point that we're not making clear enough.
And also that no path to peace could happen if these ways of functioning are not eradicated and replaced by something else. It's madness to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
That's a very interesting point, because the question is, how do we get to a place where the people who now identify themselves as Palestinians, because the Palestinians now are not the same Palestinians from the English Mandate, and I mean, back then it was all of us, the Christians, the Jews, and now it's only the Arabs who were displaced in 1948.
Including the people who joined just before the creation of the state, who just showed up in the couple decades before, from Egypt, from Syria, from all these places.
Yeah, but it's not even them, because the Palestinians call the Arabs inside of Israel the Arabs of 48. Who are the Palestinians that were displaced to Judea and Samaria and Gaza? So, in a nutshell, in the war, in the civil war that then led to the big war, in 1947-48, there was what the pro-Palestinians like to point out a lot, Plan Daled, which was the moment that the Israelis said, okay, we're taking this offensively. Plan Daled, for those of you who don't know, is basically D, the letter D. There was beforehand Plan Aleph, Plan Bet, and Plan Gimel. They were all mainly defensive. But once we start losing a lot of territory and we start losing the war, that's when Meir said, okay, we're going to die. We can't play this defensive anymore. We're going to do offensive. So because the war didn't happen in bases, it didn't happen in military, it was all happening between the villages, between the Israelis and the Arabs. Ben-Gurion said, okay, we're going to all the villages that are the Arab villages that are not hiding, but where the people who are trying to fight us and annihilate us are, where the weapons are, where the soldiers are. And we're going to go there and basically displace them. All of the villages that didn't want to take part of the war, those are the 2 million Arabs that live here today. The people who try to fight against a Jewish state, fight against the Jews and the Israelis, are the ones who got displaced. And that's a very important distinction. Because the Arabs who live here today
is certainly repeating itself.
Exactly, because the 2 million Arabs who live here today are basically the Arabs who didn't want to take place in the displacement and annihilation of Jews. Does that mean that they like us? No, they're just not taking active steps towards it. Does that mean that, some Arabs inside of Israel see themselves as Palestinians? Of course. But the vast majority, even the Palestinians in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, call them the Arabs of 48. They don't call them Palestinians. They call them the Arabs of 48. So there's a very important distinction between the Arabs inside of Israel and the people who recognize themselves as Palestinians, Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, and Jordan, and southern Lebanon, etc., etc.
I was listening recently to some podcast that teaches Arabic and Hebrew, and they pointed out that Arabs call themselves within the Green Line Arabs and the ones that are without, with like the Hal and the Kharaj or something Bara, like Arabs from inside and Arabs from outside.
Exactly.
And most of the world doesn't know that most of the Arabs and the territories would love to be Arabs from inside.
Most of them. Do you know Gil Schuster? He has in YouTube. It's called the Ask Project.
Okay.
For years, if not decades now, at least 5 years, I remember, he has been going to all kinds of places in Judea and Samaria, inside of Israel, and just going to people and asking them simple questions. And he has very long videos where he doesn't edit the answers and asks them all kinds of questions. He does that to Arabs and to Israelis. Hard questions.
Does he speak Arabic? I'm just curious.
No, he has a translator.
Okay.
He's an American, so that's one of the reasons he can just go where he wants and ask. He goes to Ramallah, he goes to Jenin, he goes to all these places. And he asks Arabs questions like, would you want peace with Israel? Do you see one coexistence with Israel? He asked them, for example, one of the episodes I like is, what do you say about all of the archaeological findings showing that Jews were here before? And all of them say it's all fake. They're all. I think one said, yeah, there was, but they were gone for 2,000 years. When he goes and asks them, a lot of them do say that they would prefer Israel governance in Judea and Samaria rather than the PA because economically it would be better. Does that mean that they like us? No. It's very similar to the protests we saw now in Gaza. They want Hamas out. Does that mean that they want Israel in? No. Does that mean they want a piece of us? No, but they're just not happy with their government. In Judea and Samaria, they have the same thing. People who, in Judea and Samaria, who come to Israel to work, see that it's much nicer here. See that the Arabs here have a much better life. And their own government has made bad decision after bad decision that leads them to have a worse economic placement. If it's how they manage the terrorist attacks, if it's how they manage their own economy, a lot of decisions.
Garbage collection. That's something that I've heard people that came to Israel and saw Judea and Samaria were shocked by how dirty the Arab villages in Judea and Samaria are. But a lot of them don't realize that that's managed by the PA. We have nothing to do with their garbage collection. We have nothing to do with the fact that Vadim are just filled with garbage.
Because you have in Judea and Samaria and a lot of Arabic villages here in Israel, you have enormous mansions with like granite and huge things. But in the street, it's very badly managed. Exactly like you said. there are amazing places in Judea and Samaria and horrible places in Judea and Samaria. A lot of people like to look at the bad places and they forget the extremely rich neighborhoods and cities and neighborhoods inside the cities.
What's his name? Sav, I think it was, recently did an Airbnb inside of Judea and Samaria.
Oh, really?
Exposing, I think it was Sav, exposing all the mansions there. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's like you don't see that sort of thing in Israel.
No, I mean, you have a lot of rich people in Israel. Some, actually, today it's some rich people in Israel. But, I mean, everybody knows there are rich Israelis. Not all people know there are extremely rich Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them don't even live here, like the Hadids, for example. Yeah, but they have summer houses in Judea and Samaria. And if it's an open-air prison concentration camp, why would they have summer houses in Judea and Samaria? Those are the questions that people, when you ask somebody who's talking bad about Israel, you ask them and they get shocked. So
I think one of the biggest myths in the Western world and misunderstandings is exactly what you're saying. That okay, there are the rich people and there are also the common people that just live really poorly under their governance and would really love to. Okay, they want their own government out, but they would really also love to have Israeli ID cards and
yeah,
they would love to be under our occupation.
I think the best two examples are, on one hand, just if you look just at Jerusalem, the old city. Every time you go to the old city, you talk to the people, you have Christians, Muslims, and Jews living together in the quarters, wherever, and they work together. And the Muslims in the old city are extremely happy with the police, for example. And then you have the eastern neighborhoods of Jerusalem, where the Arabs there are technically part of Israel, but up until today they are all what's the word in English? They're not citizens; they are habitants, residents. But not because they can, but because they don't want to be citizens of Israel. They live here, so they prefer to stay as residents. Mm-hmm. And also,
kind of a Puerto Rico situation.
Maybe I was also a resident until 2 years ago in Israel, because when I did Aliyah, Spain didn't allow double citizenship with Israel, and I prefer to have a European passport because it's easier to travel around. So I was a resident until like 2 years ago. I'm a citizen now. But for example, also, the villages over there don't look as nice as Israel. I don't know if it's changed in the past 2 years, because the Arabs in Eastern Jerusalem were asking for the municipality to come and clean and have the same services as the rest of the cities has. They said, okay, no problem. Let us come in to the streets, to the houses, to map Eastern Jerusalem, so you guys can start paying arnona. How do you call that in English?
Property tax.
Property tax, and then you can get. And they say, oh no, we don't want you to pay. We don't want to pay property tax. Okay, you don't want to pay. You don't want a map, so you can't just receive it for free. So it looks the way it looks. And then you have images of Eastern Jerusalem. Oh, it looks horrible, because of their own choices. We offer peace treaties. We offer equal right. You don't want it? Don't come complaining. That's the basic line.
And let's not even get started on schools. You know, that's a sacred thing. Of course, we couldn't run their education system, even though their standardized test grades come out much lower.
Not just that, the actual things that they're being taught need to be regulated.
Yeah, of course.
As long as they're not, we're just going to have more and more extremism. It's just going to get worse.
You have all these videos coming out of the UNRWA schools, the kids saying what they are taught. What's amazing to me is that all of this is available online. There's a site called Memri, MEMRI, and they make an amazing job collecting hours and hundreds, if not thousands of hours of materials from all of these videos that they take out of the UNRWA schools, from channels in Judea and Samaria, in Gaza, in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and putting translations for everything. But because it's not in English, like the language they're speaking, most of the world doesn't even bother to see. It's all online. It's all available. The education they get, people talking, the TV shows that they have, what they're teaching their children, everything is out there. There are TV shows for adults where they still teach that tropes about the elders of Zion, for example, the protocols of the elders of Zion, which I think the easiest way to debunk it is, how can you make a whole theory about a bunch of Jews in the same room agreeing about everything? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, the Talmud is a bunch of Jews discussing about everything. It doesn't make any sense. So
It's a fantasy novel.
exactly.
When it comes to drinking the blood of kids, I think we can all agree.
Yeah. I mean, if you learn the basic about Jewish kosher, we cannot taste any. I mean, when you kill a
You're
cow,
not allowed to drink your own blood if you have a wound. Let's say
Oh,
you
really?
touch your finger, you're not allowed to suck that blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, according
I
to
don't know.
Judaism, it's not kosher.
So for those of
It's
you
in
who
your
are not
mouth,
Jews
it's
who
fine,
listen to this
well.
podcast, when you kill a cow, you're supposed to drain it completely, and not just that. Then you have to take the meat covered in salt to suck out any remaining little piece of blood, and then you can eat it. Which, in my taste, makes the meat taste much more blander. But that's a whole other conversation. So saying we drink the blood of little Christian Catholic kids is I mean,
Yeah.
you see, you've never met a Jew, basically.
It's nuts. I'm really shocked that still exists. Because, like I said, I mean, I think I grew up in New York, so I can understand sort of why my friends that I used to consider very close would sort of start speaking on behalf of the Gazans and even Hamas, because they're led to think, like I said before, that Israel is this big occupier, just oppressing people. That, I think, is a new sort of misinformation. But you're telling me that there are actually still pockets and places where people sort of believe the horn thing,
Yeah. So when I grew up in Spain, for example, it's not like you would ask in the street and everyone would tell you, yes, Jews have horns and a tail. But most people have heard it somewhere and never questioned it. Like my friends, for example, I had friends in Spain, Catholic friends, who I was like their only Jewish friend. I used to be a competitive swimmer, and my swimming team used to make jokes about me. And I mean, the reason I have such a dark humor today is because that was my way of getting closer to my Catholic friends, just making Jew jokes. And then I would make Catholic jokes, and that's how it was a way of
My
just...
dad would love this little comment.
Exactly. I used to have the darkest Jew jokes and Holocaust jokes, because it's basically, I think dark humor, it's basically, we're putting everything on the table and saying like, see, this doesn't matter. It's not real.
Yeah, the monster's not so bad.
Exactly. So I know
Not
that...
a real monster, but
Yeah.
you can address the thing without being offended or hurt, and
It's the
so it shows that it's not like a real thing.
Yeah.
What
Exactly.
hurts are the real things.
Exactly. So at least half of the people I met have heard it somewhere and never questioned it. And we had stories in the Jewish community, like there was this piano teacher, and she went to a house to teach, again in the 90s, yeah. And she was sitting next to the little girl she was teaching, and she saw the little girl looking at her back and looking at her hair. And after like 10 minutes of this, she was distracted, and she asked, "What are you looking for?" And she was looking for the horns and the tail. She's like, "I don't know how you're hiding it so well." And I know that I don't know if she wants me to say her name, but one of our friends who also does advocacy said that she had a similar experience in Canada. So this is not, again, it's not like 100% of all people thought Jews, but it was a trope that was out there and it was never questioned, basically, but by most people. So
You have to be real dumb to think that humans can have a horns and a tail. That's another level.
yeah, look, it's like we hear, for example, I don't know, something crazy that in a lot of Muslim countries they marry girls at 3-year-old, or that people in Asia like to eat bats. Now we have videos showing those things, but before social media and Facebook, those are also very extreme claims. Like, what do you mean people just eat raw bats? Because what do you mean people just marry 3-year-olds? So now that we know Jews, you can see that some people don't have horns and a tail. I mean, sorry, the Jews don't have that some people do marry 3-year-olds in
Really good corrective surgery to get rid of those things.
I mixed the two sentences. That some people do marry 3-year-olds, but Jews don't have horns and a tail. So I can understand if you never question these things, why would you just leave him? Because also most people don't care. We care, but they don't care. They heard it, okay. fine, and they just keep on going with their lives. So again, it doesn't come from a bad place. It just is.
I want to address something. You said people marry 3-year-olds. I haven't seen as young as 3. I've seen like 6 and 7-year-olds in weddings, but I've never seen a 3-year-old.
I think I saw a video this week. I think it was or either Yemen or one of the stands. I can't remember right now, but it was basically the father promised already the daughter to a man when his wife was pregnant,
Right.
and then they interviewed when she was still 3 years old. Like, yeah, she's already not married, but
Betrothed.
exactly. And once she has her first period, they can marry and
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
In the Arab Jewish communities, they did that as well.
yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't 6 or 9 or whatever. I mean,
No,
they got married at 12, 13, but
Yeah, but
It was
in
still
my
very,
opinion,
very,
they
very
still
young.
Very, very
betrothed.
young,
No, I think
absolutely.
very,
I'm not-
very, very frequently they were betrothed beforehand. There was a year ago, less than a year ago, a 106-year-old Temani man died, and I knew his wife maybe 20 years ago before she died. Great little woman, and so I knew about their marriage, and their parents had said, okay, the woman's pregnant, the other woman's pregnant, these two couples. If you have a boy and I have a girl, we'll marry them. If you have a girl and I have a boy, we'll marry them. And that's what happened. And
Yeah.
they were, of course, cousins.
But it's not only Arabics.
And they were a great
It's not,
couple, by the way. Wonderful couple.
it's not only Arabs, countries, and Jews. You had similar stories in the United States in the 20s and 30s. I saw again on a video this week. I think it was like the last story that this happened because it went out in the news in the 30s. A man who married a 9-year-old because there was just no rules, no laws about an age limit to when you can marry. So people just married whenever. If the father gave the permission, yalla, basically. So this was like basically, I don't know if the whole world, but a worldwide phenomenon. Because that's how the world works. But now that we have a bit more information, we were a bit more advanced, for most countries, we know that that's inhumane. But in places like Yemen, where they do have access to the rest of the world, or I don't know, Saudi Arabia, or a lot of the Arab countries, and they keep doing it. Like I think right now in where is it, in Afghanistan, they're trying to bring back the age to 9 because there was the age of what's his name?
Muhammad married Aisha.
Aisha, exactly. They don't say that's the age, but it's the exact same age.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going back now. It's
In Iraq as well. It's back to 9 years old.
yeah. So exactly, you have.
Iran.
So we had a lot of bad things that we all did. Most cultures did up until 100 years ago, but we evolved. We learned. So in places that they still have exposure to our world and they're trying to go back or keep the same, I think that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, thank God for child protection laws. And as a culture, we don't do the cousin marriage thing anymore. I think in the past, maybe, but even then, I think it was frowned on for first cousins to get married. I don't think that was a common thing, even in Yemen.
No, in Safra's generation that was done.
Oh.
First cousins?
Aaron was married to his first cousin. I
Well, no.
believe also that Shmuel Salaf was married.
I'm sure that happened.
Thank God that's over. Not
Exactly.
I mean, the thing is, it's not everywhere. And places are trying to bring it back. In Europe, they're trying to bring back cousin marriage.
Really?
Yeah.
I understand the logic. They know the families know each other. There are no surprises. Whereas in our modern world, you can date someone for a few years and then you get married and you're like, who is this person? There, the families grew up together. You know exactly who you're.
Yeah, but we know that genetically,
Mm-hmm.
you might have a few issues.
Just
a few,
a couple.
just a couple. I mean, if your family tree looks like a teardrop, you might be in. Yeah. So yeah. So we evolved.
There's actually, I think, a study about cousin marriage and IQ that it's considerably lower.
I'm sure.
Yeah, not good. So you've been interviewing, like doing podcasts with people again recently. I saw that you had a big one with Mansour and was it Physics?
Yeah. So before the war, me and my best friend Yair, he's my best friend since I was 3 years old, had a podcast for like 4 years. And basically in 2024 is when we just stopped doing it every week. And we said, let's do it whenever we want, just for fun. And that's when we had Mansour over, and we've been doing it also with our good friend Coach Nemo. Now, I don't know when this is going to come out, and just a little teaser for everybody listening. I'm starting a new podcast called Heroes of Zion, where I want to start bringing to light the reality on the ground in Gaza, in southern Lebanon, bringing people who were actually there and can tell us and talk about it. So I don't do that podcast anymore. It's called Let's Talk Dugri. We had Mansour. Mansour has such unhinged stories. I mean, that guy is... I told him, I need some proofs for some of these stories. But the thing is that I question these stories, and then when he tells other things, he brings the Kabbalot. He brings receipts. He shows it. Yeah, look. After one of the podcasts, he said, yeah, I'm now going with my son to the United States. We're going to go to this place to look for gold, and then I'm going to this place to blow up a building. And yeah, okay. And then he shows us the videos of him doing these things. So, and I don't know what I can tell and cannot tell, but that guy has an amazing story, an amazing history, and he is a Druze who grew up in Israel as a Druze. He served in a special unit, and he's been, I don't know if I can say the places, I don't know if he's open about it, but he's been in places where he can say for exactly what's the reality on the ground right now in the war in Gaza and in Jordan. So he's very trustworthy. Also, that's one of the things that I think also Israelis and people from outside don't pay enough attention to. Regardless if you're left-leaning, right-leaning, we all have our opinions. But there are some voices in Israel that people who grew up in Gaza, who grew up in Arab Muslim communities like Timor David, like I forgot the names of people who escaped Gaza and came to Israel, converted to Judaism. You have Hassan Youssef, exactly. When people like you and I talk about the issue with Gaza, you have some extremism, some left-leaning, but the big bulk of Israelis try to find some kind of middle. We all want to coexist. Most of us want to live in peace. Some of us even are okay with giving them their own country if it comes with an agreement. And we know it's not going to lead to another terrorist state. Mm-hmm. But when you listen to them, they all have a very similar message. They don't want peace with you. They all want to kill you. Stop trying to find another reasoning. Listen to the people that know the reality on the ground with lived experience. Now, I won't lie. I know logically that I should listen to them. And I should lean more towards what they're telling me. But it's hard. Because I grew up with very different values. Even though I'm more right-leaning when we talk security-wise, I'm not that extreme. I don't think we should kick everybody out and kill everybody in Gaza. But when you listen to them, their main messaging is basically that. There's no hope. Clean the place out. What am I supposed to do? How are we supposed to think? I personally don't think we should kick everybody out and kill everybody. So
we always want to believe in the best in mankind, and that at heart, you have someone to negotiate with.
Or at least there's another solution. At least. Because if you can teach somebody to think this way, you can teach them to think another way. You had the Marshall Plan after Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. People like to talk about the Nazis, whatever, but there's a big difference between Nazism and jihadism. The Nazis built a whole industry to exterminate what they call the Jewish problem. It was an industry, German efficiency, to get rid of this problem. But I don't know if you guys know, but in the first solutions with the shooting pits and
they had a hard time with it.
The Nazis had a very hard time, and one of the reasons they had to stop doing that is because they had to take a lot of money in alcohol to give to the Nazis, because killing people, listening to them scream, gave them bad nightmares and what we now know is PTSD. And after the war, when they saw they were losing, they tried to destroy most of the documents, they tried to destroy most of the evidence. Hamas, for example, are proud of what they do, and they filmed it, and they publicize it, and they talk broadly about it. And Imperial Japan were more similar to the jihadists today. They really believed in Imperial Japan, and they were the ones who had kamikazes. I will kill myself for Imperial Japan, just like jihadism today. And there was a plan that said, okay, you guys cannot keep behaving this way after they finally surrendered. And it was called the Marshall Plan, where they said, okay, you guys cannot have any weapons anymore.
Let's not overlook also the nuclear bombs that we dropped on them to...
No. So the nuclear bombs is what led them to say, okay, we give up. After they surrendered, after Nazi Germany surrendered, after Imperial Japan surrendered, whichever way it was, they surrendered. And after they surrendered, we said, okay, now you cannot do what you did before. Mm-hmm. And that was a Marshall Plan. Re-education and disarming.
And it required bringing them to their knees.
Exactly. It required surrendering.
Exactly. They have to know they lose. There was a large influx of money in the Marshall Plan. I mean, it wasn't like it was just fix things yourself.
No.
Like, you lose, we're going to re-educate you, and we're going to help you develop it.
Yeah, we are going to re-educate you, and we are going to take control of your security. Yeah. It's not them doing it themselves. It's we do it for you.
Yeah, and that never happened in the Arab world.
Never happened in the Arab world.
There's been lots of the influx of money from the Marshall Plan, but it came with that re-education and that admission that you've lost, and we're going to have to re-educate you, which never happened in the Arab world. They didn't lose officially, and they didn't have that re-education. They just got lots of money.
Mm-hmm. There's also this misconception in I'm not going to say all Palestinians. I'm just going to concentrate in Gaza, for example. Even a lot of Israelis, even our leaders, thought that if the Gazans would have a good life, they will strive towards a better life. If they have all the materials and all the money, now we know it was a misconception, but that concept was still true. And that's what most people don't understand.
And it's really bad. Like, I don't understand how people can twist that. They say, oh, Netanyahu's, beseeched the Qatari people to make sure money's still going into Gaza. And they turn it into as if he's like trying to fund the war against Israel, fund Hamas. And it's not true. He's just trying to they were trying to make sure that they can still run their services, and nothing fell apart there because they didn't have an economy to...
That's, I think, one of the biggest dichotomies. On one hand, you say the Gazans want peace and the Gazans want to strive for a better future. And then when Netanyahu actually goes and allows the Qataris to pass money into Gaza, you say, oh, you were trying to... No, so you can have both positions. But the thing is, the Gazans, the Palestinians in Gaza are the people who got the most humanitarian aid per capita in the world, okay? And they did use it towards a better future. What people don't comprehend is that their better future was a lack of a Jewish state. That is the Palestinianism that we talked about before. So they were doing exactly what Western countries do. If you have more resources and more money, you will strive towards a better future. That's what everybody does. What people don't comprehend is that their better future, I'm going to repeat this again, their better future is a lack of a Jewish state. So unless they give up that dream, they're going to keep doing exactly what they keep doing up until now. The fact that Gazans have their own state in Gaza, and they still have refugee camps, 75% of Gazans are refugees. Also, another dichotomy. Right now, they're saying they're going to be displaced to Egypt. You can't take us out of our home. But 75% of you say that this is not your home. So why is now Gaza your home if up until now, 16 years, a few decades, you are saying that Gaza is not your home because you're trying to get more out of UNRWA, but now that you're going to be displaced, suddenly it's your home. You can't have this dichotomy. You have to choose one or the other. So the fact that 75% of Gazans see themselves as not Gazans, it's because they see themselves as back in Israel. They want to retake Israel. Unless they give up their refugee status, unless they give up their right, their desire for a right of return, which basically, by the way, is not a human right, doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's something that they made up. Unless they give up that, we're going to have the same problems.
Do you think people in the enlightened modern world and trying to avoid using the word woke, do you think that they can understand these things?
Oh, 100% they can. But right now there's a side that's pumping a lot more influence and money into them than we are. I know they like to say that Jews, AIPAC are lobbying the government, but in the end, when you look at the reality on the ground, the amount of money coming in, A lot more money is coming in from the Arab world, the Islamic organizations, into American institutions, into American media, into European media, into European institutions. Right now, most of England's, I think, economy and banks are owned by Arabs.
Yeah, most of the mayors are of the UK or
Of the big cities. Yeah. So same thing in the United States. Obviously, they can't understand. They have the ability to, but the influence from the other side is so much stronger. They have been pumping it for at least that we know of 2 decades now. So yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that Israel and the Jews did. We took it for granted that obviously we're on the right side. Obviously we're the humane ones. We don't have to preach it every single time, but we saw the result of the other side, Iran and Qatar, trying to, managing and successfully preaching their side to the world. Because the fact that on October, I think it was 9th, there was a protest in Columbia University.
The 8th? I think it was
the 8th?
Yeah, like the day after there were protests.
Against Israel. When Israel hasn't stepped a single foot inside of Gaza, a day or two after the worst massacre for Israelis ever since its conception, shows you the result of that. The fact that South Africa is suing Israel for genocide shows you the result of that money being pumped in.
The most corrupt country in the world, pretty much, with the highest murder rate in the world, and they're telling us...
Oh, no. That whole case is I mean, first of all, they asked for more time because of lack of evidence. The most documented war in basically history, because cameras are all over, filming everything, all of the dead bodies, injuries, rubble, everything is on video, and they have a lack of evidence to prove genocide. And then I think Ireland came in and tried to redefine the term of genocide because it doesn't apply to Israel. So basically, you don't have evidence and you have to redefine the term, it's not a genocide in a nutshell. So yeah.
And that's just proof of how deeply Muslims have embedded themselves in government. It's also happening in the US, by the way, that there are tons of Muslim politicians, mayors, and everything. And it's becoming more and more. And there's still the trope that Jews run the world, even though the influence of Muslims is way higher.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you look at the UK itself, we were talking about Ireland.
Yeah.
They're so disconnected from their people that they're making these pro-Palestinian policies, anti-Israel policies, when their people don't actually want that. There are protests yesterday. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago? 100,000 people in the streets protesting their government. They're
Against what?
Against the immigration thing that the government is pushing really hard, against their everything pro-Pali that they're doing, and basically giving up their own people. All the grooming gangs that are happening in Ireland too, all the violent stabbings, it's all an immigration problem, and they know it, and they're finally doing something about it.
It's that also one of the detachment from reality that I find fascinating. 2 days ago, a member of the PSOE party in a city called Murcia in Spain, PSOE is a very communist left-leaning party in Spain. He is all into mass immigrations from everywhere and open borders in Spain for the Arabs and the Muslims. He went into a kebab place owned by Arabs and got beat up because he's gay. And now he's suing the place for attacking him because he was gay.
Does that have any impact on his policy? Because I was wondering about what...
It happened 2 days ago, so we don't know yet. But that, for example. And then Ireland talking badly about Israel and Gaza, but then also talking badly about their mass migration and how that's affecting. Germany is one of the most open borders, and they have been having the most terrorist attacks since this war started in Europe. On the other hand, Poland has the closest borders, and they've had no terrorist attacks. So when you see the reality on the ground, but you say, oh no, in Israel and Gaza, that's a complete different story. And you have now Pakistan and India. You had the terrorist attack, and now India is closing everything with Pakistan. You have the same jihadi mentality, murdering Christians in Africa. You have all of these things. So all of those make sense. But Israel and Gaza, that's a whole different story. That's completely different. Of course it is. Because Israel, a country that has the biggest gay parade in the Middle East, that has equal rights for its own Arab citizens instead of Israel. But it's in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, it's the lack of sense is just baffling.
Ever since the start of the war, I realized that I had to get involved, but I wasn't comfortable putting my face out there. So what I would do, I had been on Instagram for maybe a year or two, not very active, but I started, seeing all of these posts and resharing them, but more importantly, going into the comments and debating people. And really, I spent so much time debating basically anti-Semites, whether it's actually in the comments of Reels or in private DMs. The most recent one, the one that I'm in right now, the guy's very, very obviously anti-Israel, but one thing he said that made me laugh was like, well, why don't you guys just, take over Judea, the West Bank, he called it. Why don't you just take over the West Bank and, expel all the extremists and then just make it part of the country and give everybody full rights? And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. We should do that. That's kind of what we're trying to do in Gaza right now.
That's what
we're slowly taking over Gaza, let's be honest.
we're taking Gaza, but the solution you said, well, we've tried to do similar things, not us taking Judea and Samaria, but we offered the Palestinians Judea and Samaria a few times. Also, one of the talking points that it's, I think, very similar to what you said, against what you said, is the fact that we had Rabin and then he got killed, and that's why we don't have peace. We know exactly what would happen if Rabin was murdered. First of all, we know that Bibi Netanyahu would have won because he was higher in the polls. But Ehud Barak later came and gave, I think it was the same or a better offer to Yasser Arafat. Was it like a year later, 2 years later? I think 96, 98, something like that.
Yeah.
So in Camp David. Was it Camp David? Yeah. Arafat said no. The main issue with the Palestinians, the reason that they accepted the Oslo Accords but not their own state is because they have to recognize that now they have a state and they have to give up the right of return, and there's a Jewish state. So right now they recognize that Israel is a state, but they still see it as a second Palestinian state. What they want is a full Palestinian state with no Jews in it, and then another Palestinian state where they can return to. And that's the main problem. So, should we take Judea and Samaria? I think the best solution, if we're talking long term, give the Palestinians their own state, but with these two terms. You recognize the Jewish state, and you give up your right of return.
I just don't see that happening.
Also,
That's exactly the problem.
besides that not happening, I think that we're missing the fact, and we just keep glossing over the fact that in the Palestinian state, let's say, there are going to be no Jews. Why is that okay? Why is that acceptable?
It's not okay.
It shouldn't be okay. For that, just for that fact alone, I don't think that's a good plan. I don't think they should get a state because it's just not. I mean, where's the logic in this? First of all, they kicked out ancient settlements in Judea and Samaria, in Gaza in '49 when they took it over. Why shouldn't those people who have been there for thousands of years? Why should
Do they also have the right of return? All the Jews that were kicked out of Judea and Samaria? No, right? Exactly.
No, nothing.
If France would say, okay, we don't want any Jews living here, would that be okay? If Turkey would say that, no.
Exactly, but for them, for some reason, it's okay.
Exactly.
And we're the racists.
But if I'm completely honest, if we can get to a point where that happens, I think long term, fuck it. Go ahead. Then we can keep talking about anything else. And the only slight light of hope that I'm seeing towards that kind of future is the Abraham Accords. Because right now we have two main players of influence in the Middle East. We have Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran is obviously still very, very jihadist, very extreme Islamic. And Saudi Arabia is trying to strive towards a better future.
They're kind of playing both sides of the aisle right now.
Look, they didn't jump to the other extreme. They are still very Islamic, very Arabic. They still have Mecca there. But, right?
I'm talking about the Iranians specifically. Saudi Arabia and Iran have economic deals right now that are actually keeping the IRGC alive. And the Iranian people are very not happy with this.
Yeah, look, just like we are still funding the PA, they're still funding money from Israel is going to terrorists, and we're still having we're still doing things with Lebanon and Egypt. I mean, money is money, but when you talk influence-wise, right now Saudi Arabia is trying to strive towards a more futuristic future. They're building more futuristic cities. They're trying to open their world to other people. And I think
the laws a bit, outlawing
exactly.
protesting.
They still have slaves.
Rights. Yeah.
Their rights for women are
That's
still
okay.
very, very low. They're still, I mean, the mass displacement they did with Bedouin tribes in their west side for like the project called The Line is horrendous. But they're trying to strive there step by step. It's not going to happen in the next 5 years, but like in the next few decades, it's going to happen. And if we get that influence into Gaza instead of Iranian influence in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, there would be a first step. Because the biggest problem is that they don't have a model, they don't have an example or a leader that tries to strive towards a different future. Not Mahmoud Abbas and not Hamas. Mahmoud Abbas wasn't like 2 weeks ago that he said, I'm going to keep giving, even if I have 1 cent, it will go to martyrs and people who did terrorist attacks. Exactly. So he doesn't want to stop the pay for slay. Unless that leadership changes, and leadership means that the education changes, we were not going to have that kind of future. But if we manage to get a bigger economic force with the Abraham Accords in the Middle East and basically cut the head of the snake in Iran, we're not going to see any steps. Once that future happens, we're going to see a difference in the region.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So maybe then we can strive towards a different future with the Palestinians.
What do you think about Al-Jalani and the Abraham Accords that he claims to want to join, but in the meantime, his loyalists just, unearthed a rabbi, like a sage of Israel?
Oh, and the massacre on Alawites and Druze,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
it's still happening. First of all, Al-Jalani is Al-Qaeda. Now he's HTS. It's all the same extreme Islamic rhetoric, the same. That's where he comes from. Did he suddenly change all of his life's and worldly perspectives? No. Syria right now is unhinged and uncontrolled with terrorism, 100%. But, and the fact that Al-Jalani is now wearing a suit doesn't mean he changed. But, any country who wants to normalize with Israel, I would say yes, because a peace treaty and normalization are two completely different things. And in a nutshell, I don't think we have the privilege to say, we have, on one hand, keep being in a war with Syria or normalize. I don't think that we have the power to change Syria. They are going to keep doing whatever they're doing. But if we can normalize with the country, fucking yes, amazing. If that means peace in any sort of way, commerce in any sort of way, sure. I don't think we have the privilege to say, no, we don't like what you're doing, so we're not going to normalize. I think we should strive to normalize with everybody. Like we said, Saudi Arabia right now is not the perfect place, and we're trying to strive towards normalization. Same thing with Egypt, same thing with Jordan. But we have some sort of normalization and peace. So, do I think we should normalize? Yes, because normalization comes with a lot of international guarantees, things they can't do. Similar, not the same, but similar like NATO. They have a lot of international guarantees for normalization. So I think we should, because it just says that there's another country that's kind of part of our alliance in a way. It doesn't mean that they like us or they want to, no, but it means that we have one less country to worry about immediately. We should still keep the borders like a hawk and still keep watching them, but at least that means that there's some sort of, we're seeing eye to eye in some sort of way.
That worries me a little bit. It feels to me like short-term thinking, because at the same time you have forces in Syria that are struggling for power, that are trying to, and what right now what Jalani is trying to do is consolidate the power, trying to stabilize things under his rule. And I mean, if it does consolidate under Jalani, what does that mean for us in the future? He might just be, trying to stabilize so that he can attack. I mean, this is a common thing. We all know what Turkey is. But if we don't normalize, maybe there's a better chance for the Kurds and the Druze and whatever to form some sort of coalition that can take power. And then you have a real ally, like a real ally, which is something Israel's never had in the region.
But if you normalize with a country, you might have some sort of influence on them, because if you start commercing, if they start buying things, working with, then that is not the biggest bridge, but more bridges, more, not just influence, but some sort of cooperation between Syrians and Israelis.
Will we have those economic and have they worked in the past? Are Jordanians any happier with us now than they were in
When is the last time the Jordanians massively attacked you?
Massively attacked? No, but that's because of their government, not because of the people.
Exactly.
There are Jordanians that cross in and attack.
Oh, 100%. That's what I'm saying. I don't think Syrians are going to like us. That's why we should still keep watching the borders like a hawk, and we should keep the highest point of the mountain in the Hermon 100%. But if the governments can do that, I think we should.
But you have so many in Syria right now that do actively like us. I mean, if you look at those minority communities, they want to be under our rule. They say it online. They're out there talking about it. They're very adamant.
Now there was a big movement of Druze into Israel that Syrians had to let them pass to Israel. If there's some sort of agreement and normalization, they can do it more freely. And more Syrians can do it more freely. Just like Gazans used, I think, tens of thousands of Gazans used to cross every day to Israel to work.
But this is happening while southern Syria, the Druze regions, are not under Syrian control. Jolani doesn't control there. He's not going to do anything about that border. No. The southern Syria is controlled by the Druze and Israel supported.
Controlled military, physically, yes, but I mean, geographically, he does control southern Syria. Politically, he does control southern Syria.
On paper, but does he have any influence on the region?
Well, I mean, he just got to power, what, a month ago? 2 months ago?
Right, but that's what I'm saying. If we let him keep going and gain that influence and gain that control, then it might be much worse for us in the long run.
There are people who know more than me that said something interesting that I'm still trying to comprehend, and I didn't look very much into it, but they said if al-Jolani right now is the one in power, there have been some influences that allowed him to get into power, some Western influences that allowed him to get into power.
Turkey, but okay.
No, I don't know if Turkey, but I'm saying like Israel, United States, those kinds of... Maybe also Turkey as well. So I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but people who know more than me about those areas, Rowano and Osman is one of the people who talked about it. She is a Syrian Lebanese, and she talked about this also online. And I trust. I want to trust. There's a limit to things I can look into. Look, everything you're saying is right. And I think we should always keep a side eye or just a front eye towards Syria, 100%. But also I'm trying to find a way which is not always being offensive, not always just being military. I think trying to find... It's not the perfect solution, but if this could be a first half step towards that kind of future, I mean, bring it on.
What if one of the things they demand for normalization is that we retreat security forces from the Druze regions of Syria and then leads to a massacre?
No, then no. Just like I don't think Israel would never accept that kind of agreement. Just like right now, we're not accepting a ceasefire agreement with Gaza that would mean Hamas staying in power. I think there are some red lines that we have. I don't think we should accept a normalization by any means. Again, we should keep security on top.
Yeah.
If you accept that, we can have normalization, we can have commerce. Just like we have in a way with Jordan. We're still looking at the borders. We have control over the borders. We're not just opening it to everybody. We have, I think, 2 crossing points with Jordan. One next to Eilat, 3.
I think there's one in the north as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not 100 or 0. It's the gray area in the middle.
Yeah. Let's wrap up with one last question. If there's any specific step that you think that Israel can take to foster peace or improve our situation in general, one solid thing that you could, recommendation that you could give that will improve our very messy situation.
I think that question is the most Israeli Jewish question you could have asked, because we're always trying to look inward what we are not doing or what we should do. And I think since October 7th, we still should have that mentality, but take kind of a step back and look at the history and look at what we have done, because we were the main players here trying to strive towards peace. We were the only ones trying to offer peace treaties. And I think right now we should take a little bit of a different stance. On a personal level, I think the best thing that we can do is not go towards hate towards all Palestinians, all Arabs, and still try to keep some sort of hope and not see everybody like a potential violence or terrorist or whatever. I think that's in a personal level. That's the best thing we can do. But on a larger scale, on a state scale, we always take all the agency towards us, and we haven't given enough agency towards the other side. And I think one of the best things that we can do to strive towards peace and coexistence is start giving the other side more agency. What are you not doing? Why are we the only one taking steps? Where is your responsibility? And I think once you stop treating them as babies, that everything happens to them. What can we do? What can we teach them? How can we change them? Where is your responsibility? Stop treating them as babies. Start treating them as very capable people, as we have seen they can be on October 7th and with the PA. And once you treat them as adults, you can start talking to them eye to eye. I think long term and short and long term, that's the most responsible things we can do towards a peaceful coexistence.
Good psychological advice too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
It's kind of how you would also want to raise your kids. Educate your kids. Give them agency. If you're always the one that's trying to take care of everything for them and blaming yourself for the problems, of course, that's not really educating them to be.
100%. That's something very Israeli in kibbutzim. You see just kids walking around. You don't baby them until they're 18. Right. You allow them to be themselves, and you make them make their own decisions. Just same thing with the Palestinians.
When I made a point like that to an old friend of mine from high school, this was a few years ago when we were in sort of a political discussion. He lives in New York. He found that very patronizing, that I would talk about us as the parents and them as the kids. Totally misunderstanding, I think.
But Israelis do that. The European Union does that. UNRWA does that. UN does that. I mean, that's how everybody has been treating the Palestinian movement. Yeah. We should stop. They have proven themselves to be very capable people. They're very smart. They're very capable. Treat them as adults. It's like a kid throwing a tantrum. If you allow the kid to throw a tantrum and you give him what he wanted, he will learn that that's the way to get things he wants. Mm-hmm. If you stop feeding the tantrums, like last point I'm going to make, like you said, the hostages. The Gazans learned that the hostages have a very high price. They kidnapped Gilad Shalit. They got 1,000 and something terrorists for him. So next time they train. We have the videos of the training to get more hostages. And they kidnapped 250. And one of the biggest things right now preventing us from reaching our goals are the hostages they took. Everything that you allow them and you feed them, that's what they're going to do for the next time.
I think every day or every week, I don't know, choose your time scale that they don't return the hostages. You just move the line 500 meters. You take 500 meters more land moving north until it's gone.
Yeah, but we don't know where the hostages are. We don't want to kill our own hostages. That's the biggest problem.
Right, I'm not saying like this.
No, of course.
If you don't return them, we're just going to take your land until you return them.
I think that
then we can stop and talk about how to move from there, or do it in the West Bank, the Judea and Samaria. Move the Green Line back. Do something that makes them feel the pain that we're feeling when we don't have our people here.
I 100% agree that you should give them. I mean, the result of doing what they did should be something that they don't want to happen. 100%. What it is, I don't know, but we should not keep playing their own game.
I don't think they have anything else other than land that they would be hurt over losing.
Yeah, but also you know that they have the power to just start murdering hostages like they did up until now if we don't play their game. So this is a very, very delicate game. But again, I know we have to wrap up, but I think the hostages' families are allowed to do whatever they want. I think their families and their friends should do, but the fact that we're going every single week, the people who in Tel Aviv go out every single week, and they repeat Hamas rhetorics against the country, and they're showing and printing in big Hamas's videos with the hostages, and they're publicizing in channel 12 and 11 Hamas's videos from the hostages. I think that just fuels Hamas to keep doing what they're doing. If we're trying to strive, we're trying to help their families, help treat them, give them support, but not reinforcing Hamas's rhetoric with the hostages, then we're bringing down back again the price for the hostages. It would be easier to get the hostages back. The fact that we're empowering Hamas's rhetoric publicly as a state raises the price for the hostages. Yeah. So that's a whole very delicate situation.
Well, you're a very smart guy.
Thank you very much.
A lot of life experience and many languages, and it's been quite enlightening and encouraging.
This was a very good conversation.
Yeah,
thank you guys very much.